Yeah, it's kind of when you're watching it, you're like...
Next time I film, I get a flat desk.
Okay, so we were talking about the pituitary gland and growth hormone last time, remember? And we left off with that giant. You remember his name?
Wadlow.
Yeah. Robert Wadlow. Let's continue that video.
A man from a small town on the banks of the Mississippi who first inspired doctors.
I think we were about right here.
William Goiter.
But after that,
Were we?
his growth velocity, that is, how much he grows per year, was not particularly remarkable.
But though the speed of his growth had declined, he still continued to get larger. Dr. Goiter saw all of Robert's medical records and has no doubt that his enormous stature was caused by a medical condition.
Well, I think he had a growth hormone secreting tumor of the pituitary, one of the more common types of pituitary tumors.
The pituitary is one of the master glands of the brain, located just below the optic nerve. It's normally the size of a pea, but if things go wrong, a tumor can form. This tumor can grow to the size of a tennis ball and cause huge amounts of growth hormone to flood through the body. The condition is called acromegaly, and there was no effective treatment in Robert's time. The effects on his health were catastrophic.
It's very clear that he was having great difficulty in walking. He had a foot brace on, and he was greatly incapacitated.
He was also losing sensation in his legs.
The neuropathy is disease of the nerves that carry the message of sensation up to the spine and up to the brain. So if you lose those nerves, you don't feel pain.
Robert had also developed a condition called foot drop and had to wear a metal brace. And it was this that led directly to his early death.
This foot brace that he had for foot drop wore against his ankle and produced an ulcer which he was unaware of. And this ulcer became infected and he died of what was called in the old days blood poisoning.
Robert was only 22 when he died and nearly 9 feet tall.
His mother, she was afraid that perhaps his body would be exhumed and that his skeleton would be displayed. So they poured concrete all over the coffin so that grave robbers couldn't get his skeleton. I am told that the carpet was worn out at the funeral home because people lined up on the sidewalk alone and viewed him all through the day and night.
I really don't think Robert knew that he would die at age 22. Seems so unnecessary. That little infection on his ankle caused him to die. And naturally, we and all of our people, all of our friends in here and all, keep wondering, after all these years, how long would Robert have lived before the good Lord took him?
But Robert's early death was not unusual. Few giants lived to a great age. This is the skeleton of a young man from Kentucky who was over 7 feet 6 inches tall. Scientific analysis of his bones revealed that he was around 24 years old when he died. The bones offer another clue about the causes of giantism. These white bands around the bones are called epiphyses. At the end of puberty, they get harder, preventing bones from growing any longer. But in giants, they do not harden, and growth continues unchecked. Acromegaly affects about 1 in every 17,000 people. Only those who get the condition before puberty are likely to become giants. If their acromegaly is not treated, they just grow and keep on growing.
This program on Discovery.
If you get a tumor of your pituitary gland after you're done growing, then you get what this lady has. See, she looks normal at age 9 and normal at age 16. And girls are usually done growing by age 16. And then she got the tumor, and so growth hormone was being put out, but she couldn't grow any bigger, but your cartilage can still grow. So her nose gets big, her ears get big, and you have problems with your joints because there's cartilage in your joints. And so
That's
you...
before puberty?
That's if you get the tumor after puberty. So you can't grow any taller, your bones won't stretch anymore because they're all solid. But your cartilage will still grow. And so that's, people who have acromegaly all look like that in the face. All their faces look real similar. There's the goiter that we talked about. This is a condition, this little kid has what's called cretinism, which is also known as hypothyroidism. Hypo means below, and thyroid is talking about your thyroid gland. And so your thyroid gland not functioning, it's not putting out the hormones it needs. Do y'all remember what thyroid gland hormones do?
Metabolism.
Oh,
Yeah, they control your metabolism. So if your metabolism is too slow, your body chemistry is not working fast enough, you're not building proteins and fats and stuff fast enough, you don't grow correctly. And that's called cretinism. You usually end up mentally retarded, and you have all sorts of other problems, and you die at an early age. Goiter can also cause a condition called exophthalmia, which causes your eyes to bulge out. And it happens because, for some reason, when you don't have enough iodine in your system and you're not making these hormones, for some reason fat builds up behind your eyeballs. And I think it's because the fat is not being metabolized, it's not being broken down fast enough, and it pushes your eyeballs forward. And there's some famous people that have had exophthalmia to some extent. Have you ever seen Rodney Dangerfield? He can like bulge his eyes out whenever he wants to. They kind of come out, because he had some exophthalmia.
It only bulges when you nip it?
No, it'll do it on its own if you have it bad enough. He didn't have it bad enough. Exophthalmia. There's a big goiter. And a big sideburn.
But what does a goiter do? What does it do that's bad exactly?
Well, it doesn't do anything that's bad. Again, what the problem is...
It's just the iodine.
Yeah, your thyroid gland, which, oh gosh, I gotta go through all this. There's your thyroid gland.
It's just
Isn't producing enough hormone. And one of the reasons why that is if you're not getting enough iodine in your diet. And so your body thinks that your thyroid gland's not big enough. Your body doesn't know you're not getting enough iodine. It thinks your thyroid gland's not big enough. So the thyroid gland grows like crazy and becomes this big goiter. And it wasn't that the thyroid gland was too small. It was that you didn't have any iodine in your blood.
But it's not necessarily like a bad thing. It's just something.
No, it's not necessarily bad. The lack of thyroid hormone is bad. And you can fix it by taking iodine supplements, and it'll eventually go down, I think. So, that's what that guy has. Here's a funny goiter video from Seinfeld.
Mrs. Oliver?
Yes, my dear.
Oh.
What's the trouble? Are you all right?
Yes.
It's my goiter, isn't it?
But did you say goiter? What goiter?
This football-shaped lump jutting out the side of my neck. Does it bother you?
Bother me? Oh. Why would a little goiter like that bother me? No, not a bit. It's nothing. It's nothing. It's, in fact, it's very distinctive, you know. I mean, you want to know something? I wish I had one. Really?
Silliness. That boy has cretinism. That's how you end up looking if your thyroid gland's not working
Short
right.
legs.
Yeah, short legs. Short, just didn't
How
grow.
old is he? Like,
I don't know.
Why would you look at that if your metabolism is
Well, your metabolism is chemical reactions going on in the body. So your cells have to break down sugars for energy, and it's just not happening very quickly.
you're not growing?
So you're not growing very quickly. Here is how thyroxine works. Thyroxine is one of the thyroid hormones.
Thyroxine is a water-insoluble hormone that is brought to the target cell via a protein carrier. Because it is lipophilic, thyroxine can easily pass through the cell membrane. Thyroxine contains 4 iodines and is often abbreviated T4, tetraiodothyronine. The thyroid gland also secretes smaller amounts of a similar molecule that has only 3 iodines, called Triiodothyronine T3. Both hormones enter target cells, but all the T4 that enters is converted into T3. Thus, only the T3 form of the hormone enters the nucleus and binds to nuclear receptor proteins. The hormone receptor protein complex, in turn, binds to the appropriate hormone response elements on DNA. The binding of the hormone receptor complex has a direct effect on the level of transcription at the site where it binds. The messenger RNA, mRNA, produced then codes for specific proteins.
Some of y'all don't watch these things. I think that might be part of your problem. This is good info showing you how these things work.
Kind of like visual lessons, right?
Yeah. The T3 goes into the nucleus, binds with the receptor protein, and that kind of acts as a transcription factor to get something done, to make RNA that ends up making proteins. And those proteins act as enzymes that have some sort of effect in the cell. Now, some cells it has one effect, and other cells it has other effects. So it depends upon the cell and the particular protein, what part of the DNA was activated down there.
So T3 and T4 are made, but only T3 goes in the nucleus?
That's correct. The T4 gets converted to T3 somewhere in the cytoplasm.
Why is it T4 if it's not useful?
What did it say it is?
T4 is more potent. I think one T4 can make several T3s. That's a good question. I know T4 is for some reason more potent. They only show a T4 making a T3 here.
Is this how all of them do it?
No, this is just how thyroxine works.
So do we didn't know just how thyroxine works?
They could ask you how thyroxine works, yeah.
What did it say that it is, that it easily goes through the membrane? Like swallowing?
Lipid soluble.
Yeah, if it's fat, see the membrane's made of fats, lipids. So anything that's lipid soluble can go through the membrane. Steroid hormones are like that. And thyroxine is a hormone that happens to be like that. But most hormones aren't like that. Most hormones have to bind at the surface of the membrane.
So that's a steroid hormone.
T3 is like a steroid, but I don't think it is a steroid. I'm not sure what it is. I don't know. If I don't know, you probably don't have to know.
Isn't that like steroids?
Steroids do that. Steroids go right through the membrane. So T3 does act like a steroid, doesn't it? Another thing the thyroid gland secretes is a hormone called calcitonin. Calcitonin is squirted out by the thyroid gland, and it lowers the amount of calcium in the blood. The calcium concentration of the blood is real important to keep steady. if the calcium level gets too high, then calcitonin is released, and that causes the calcium level in the blood to go down. If the calcium level gets too low, you know what happens? There's another hormone that's released. Would you know it from your reading or something that you did?
Give us a hint. I know.
So here is calcitonin release. That lowers calcium concentrations, calcium concentration in the blood. And down here, the hormone is called parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid hormone.
PTH.
Often, yeah, PTH. And that raises the calcium levels. How does the hormone raise the calcium levels or lower the calcium levels? Any idea?
Negative.
It has to do with something in this picture over here.
Spongy bone.
It has to do with this word.
Boner.
Yeah, bones will take the calcium from the blood if they're signaled to by calcitonin. The calcitonin is squirted out by the thyroid gland, floats all around the body, the bones sense it, and the bone cells, when it senses calcitonin, the bone cells start grabbing calcium from the blood. And that builds your bones thicker. If the calcium levels are low, the parathyroid hormone is released, and that tells the bone cells to release the calcium back into the blood. This way, your calcium levels in your blood stay relatively constant. The calcium levels in the blood are constantly going up and down around a certain level.
Is that why people say like
Calcium builds strong bones.
Yeah, like 15.
That's calcium builds strong bones. That's right. If you drink a lot of milk or eat a lot of meat, the calcium level in your blood goes way up after you eat it. And then the thyroid hormone will squirt out some calcitonin, and then your bones will take all that calcium up. And now your bones will be thicker than they were before.
Too much calcium?
I guess I think if you got too much calcium, then the bones will store all they need, and then what's left, you'll pee away. The kidneys remove it, and you end up peeing out the extra calcium.
Like with osteoporosis, you take massive
Yes.
calcium and vitamin D supplements to fight that.
Women will have, all of you women will have to face this problem when you get old. You remove calcium from your bones pretty easily, but you don't put it back as easily, and I'm not sure why. But your bones get brittle as you get older. It happens in men too, but it happens faster in women for some reason. And so women often have this condition called osteoporosis where the bones are real brittle and can break. And so if you take calcium supplements, you're at least getting as much back into the bone as you can. You're going to be peeing out some calcium when you take those calcium supplements.
My grandparents drink bone juice.
Ooh, good. So that's what they show here when they're showing this whole thing here is if the blood calcium is too high, calcitonin is released and that lowers it. And if the blood calcium is too low, PTH is released and that raises it back up. The bones will release some. The kidneys will stop excreting calcium. The intestines will make sure to absorb all the calcium from the food that it can. And that will raise the blood up. The blood calcium levels. So you got to keep calcium levels normal. Why is calcium so important? Why do you need calcium at all? We already learned this.
ATP.
Not ATP. Remember the muscles? Remember the calcium binds to the troponin in the muscle to move your muscle? So when you're moving your muscles, the calcium is being used. So it's important to have plenty of calcium. The adrenal gland. The adrenal gland is stimulated by the nervous system. How many knew I was going to do that?
I just like had
So the signal just went down your spinal cord for those of you that were scared.
Whoops.
And went down, the nerve signal went down into your adrenal gland. There's the little adrenal gland. Remember, that's the hat that sits on top of the kidneys. And it's got two parts to it. It's got an outer part called the adrenal cortex. Cortex means the outside. And it's got an inner part called the adrenal medulla. Now, the adrenal medulla releases the adrenaline, epinephrine and norepinephrine, which are two. Epinephrine is adrenaline, and norepinephrine is called noradrenaline, which is kind of like adrenaline. And these two hormones cause your body to do lots of things that prepare it for a fight. It's called the fight or flight mechanism. And it helps cells release glucose. It tells the liver to release glucose into the blood. So there's plenty of sugar in your blood for activity for cells.
what on top of the liver?
The liver stores all the glucose.
The glycogen, right?
Yeah, it stores it as glycogen. That's right.
Release the glucose in the blood.
The liver releases the glucose into the blood. I mean, you always have some glucose in your blood, but in an emergency situation, don't you want more? Were you scared when I came up here?
More is better.
Yeah, so you need more sugar in your blood, so that the liver, in response to the adrenaline, the liver dumps out a bunch of glucose. There's other things the adrenaline does. It causes the metabolism of the cells to speed up. It'll cause your hairs to stand up on end. When you get scared, you can feel the hairs on your neck standing up on end.
Whenever my dog is like barking really loud at something, he gets like a mohawk on his back.
Yeah. See, it makes animals look bigger than they really are.
It's like cats.
And so if something's coming to attack it, all of a sudden the thing looks bigger, and you're like, the attacker's like, wait a second, I didn't know it was that big. I'm not gonna mess with it. So those are quick. The adrenal medulla releases the quick stress hormones that act very quickly, epinephrine and norepinephrine. The outer part of the adrenal gland releases a couple of hormones, or a group of hormones called glucocorticoids and mineralocorticoids. And those hormones act as a slow stress response. They help raise your blood pressure. They help raise the amount of salt in your body. And in this act, having higher blood pressure makes sure there's plenty of blood going to all your organs. And that makes your body act more effectively, your organs act more effectively. But these hormones act over a longer period of time. So this is like not quick stress when you're scared, but slower stress, like when you have a test tomorrow. And your body's, when you have this exam week or something like that, and your body is you really got to function well this week. You can't be oversleeping. You really got to be able to study and pay attention for a long amount of time. And your body releases these two classes of hormones that kind of raise it. If you check your blood pressure during exam week, if you actually care about exams, I know some of y'all don't, but your blood pressure will be higher during exam week because of these hormones.
What kind of corticoids are they?
They're called glucocorticoids and mineralocorticoids. Glucocorticoids help break down protein and fat, so you can use them as energy. And mineralocorticoids help raise blood pressure.
So it's his immune system suppressed as well.
Yeah, it does suppress your immune system, so you'll tend to get sick after long periods of stress. Let's see how it works. Is this where y'all stop paying attention?
No.
Don't. Let's see how this thing works. This is a glucocorticoid.
Glucocorticoid hormones are steroid hormones that influence nutrient metabolism.
These hormones activate genes for proteins involved in processes such as the synthesis of glucose, the breakdown of proteins, and the mobilization of fat. Glucocorticoid hormones are secreted by endocrine glands into the bloodstream. They enter cells through transporters in the plasma membrane. Once inside the cytosol, the hormone molecules can bind to glucocorticoid receptors, which function as transcription factors that activate genes. The binding of the hormone causes proteins that were bound to the receptors, such as the heat shock protein HSP90, to be released. Release of HSP90 allows two receptors to bind and form a dimer, as well as exposing a nuclear localization signal on the receptor. The receptor dimer is then allowed to enter into the nucleus through a nuclear polar. The receptor dimer is able to bind to specific DNA sequence regions called glucocorticoid response elements, or GREs, that are near target genes. The GREs function as enhancers, so that binding of a receptor dimer to a GRE activates transcription of the nearby target gene.
Now, you would never be expected to know all that stuff, but they could easily give you a paragraph where they tell you everything he just said there, and then they ask you give you four answers. You know, they ask you a question and give you four answers, and you have to pick from the right one according to what happens. So, so it's good to kind of try to understand what they're talking about here. The steroid molecule enters the cell. Now, normally steroid molecules, do y'all recognize that as a steroid?
Yeah.
We learned that way back in chapter 3. Normally steroid molecules can just go right through the membrane. So I don't know why this one's using a protein to go through, but it is, so I'll accept that they know what they're talking about. And anyway, this thing goes in there, and this is the receptor protein for that hormone, and so it receives it, and when it does, those things fall off. I don't know what those things are, but there's something that was there before, and now they're gone. And now a couple of these things bind together, and now they're the right shape to enter the nucleus and attach to the DNA and starts transcription of a protein. So we call that thing a transcription factor. They might go through that whole thing and say the dimer that was formed is which of the following? A transcription factor, starting transcription. B, an inhibitor that stops enzymes from working. C, you know what I'm saying here. So if you understand what a transcription factor is, then you can make sense of the whole thing, paragraph that they say beforehand. I'm not sure how they'll ask these questions, but they will give you complicated explanations first. We've seen that in some of these questions, haven't we? Let's not talk about that. This is Addison's disease. If you look on page 764, Addison's disease is characterized by a peculiar bronzing of the skin, particularly noticeable in light-skinned individuals. Note the color of the face and the hands compared to the hand of an individual without the disease. This is when you have too much, is it too much or too little? Inappropriate amount of adrenal hormones.
So they're just always tan?
Does it say too much? Inappropriate attack on the adrenal cortex by the immune system. Oh, so there's not enough. Addison's disease is when you don't have enough adrenal hormones. And it's because the body has attacked the adrenal glands and destroyed some of those cells. We call that an autoimmune disorder, when the body attacks its own organs. It's the same thing that causes diabetes. And so, for some reason, I don't know what the mechanism is, but for some reason it causes the skin to become dark.
It stimulates melanocytes.
Oh, melanocytes start squirting stuff out. Here's a lady with a syndrome called Cushing Syndrome. And that's when you have too much adrenal hormones. And you take on, it looks like you're gaining a lot of weight. But in actuality, it's a lot of water is being held because you're squirting out too much of these hormones that cause you to retain salt. So you retain water in your cells, and you get real big. That's due to water retention is why she looks that way. And after treatment, she looks normal. There's a boy with Cushing's disease before treatment and after treatment.
Do they have to get treatment more than once?
Yeah, I think it's a regimen of it depends what it came from. If it's a tumor or something in the on the adrenal glands, then they cut the tumor out and he goes back to normal eventually.
Cortisone supplements can cause that.
Really? Huh.
It's like one of the main side effects.
Really?
When you're on steroids, don't you like your face get
I don't know.
steroids? Because my cousin was taking steroids for like he was sick and his like face got like really puffed up.
Huh.
It was weird.
Maybe it's because of the higher blood pressure and the retaining of water. That could be. Now, we all know about insulin and glucagon, or sort of. I've already talked about it once. But insulin is released when there's a lot of sugar in the blood. And then the liver and the muscles and the fat stores away the sugar. When there's not enough sugar in the blood, low blood glucose, the pancreas secretes glucagon. And the fat and the liver release their sugars to the blood, so the blood glucose level rises. So your blood sugar levels go up and down, just like your blood calcium levels, up and down around some average number. So you eat food, blood glucose goes high, and then you store it away. But eventually, if you hadn't eaten in a while, it gets down too low, and then glucagon is released, and that causes it to come back up. Your liver releases the stored sugar. If you have diabetes, you're not making insulin correctly, so the blood sugar goes up after you eat, and there's nothing to bring it down. So people with diabetes give themselves an insulin shot, and that makes it come